It is no secret that there are so many benefits to getting outside, even in the winter, including improving your sleep quality, improving your immune function, reducing things like inflammation, feelings of depression, and more. However, getting outside is no doubt more difficult to do in the colder months. Hello adventurers, welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things outdoors. I'm Shelby, a hiking and backpacking guide in Colorado, and today I'm going to be giving you my top secrets for staying warm in cold weather or on a winter hike. Being properly prepared is one of the most important things you can do to keep yourself safe, and I get asked all the time about what is the best way to properly layer in the winter. So let's get into it. When it comes to proper layering when you're in cold weather or on a winter hike, you're typically looking for three things: a base layer, a mid layer, and an outer layer, ideally something that is windproof and waterproof. For base layers, you want to look for something that is lightweight and moisture wicking. This is because this is the layer that is sitting directly on your skin, so you want it to keep you comfortable and dry. Especially in the winter, you want to avoid cotton base layers at all costs, including cotton socks. If you want to learn why, feel free to check out my most recent video where I dug all into why to avoid cotton on a hike. But in terms of the best materials to wear, look for merino wool or synthetic materials. Your mid layer is going to sit on top of your base layer, and the purpose of this is to retain your body heat. A good example would be what I'm wearing right now. So this would be my base layer right here, close to my skin, and then this fleece is a perfect mid layer. One thing that's important to keep in mind for your mid layer is paying attention to what your activity level is going to be on your adventure. So if you are going to be doing a really strenuous activity such as hiking uphill or backcountry skiing, then you probably want a mid layer that's more breathable, such as a down jacket or a lighter fleece. Thicker fleeces can do a really great job of helping block out wind, but if you're going to be doing a really high level activity, then that's going to cause your body to retain too much heat, making you overheat, which is something we want to avoid, and I'll get into why in just a minute. The last layer you want to look for is an outer layer, often referred to as a shell. Depending on where you live and where you're adventuring, a rain jacket would make a perfect outer layer. Your outer layer is often going to be your most technical. So what you're looking for is something that's waterproof and windproof, aka it's going to do a great job of shielding you from the elements. I use my outer layer to protect me from the cold, wind, rain, snow, basically anything Mother Nature can throw your way. This is truly an essential layer that's going to help protect you from winter conditions. So Gore-Tex or other waterproof fabrics are great materials to consider. Something that's really important to consider when you're looking for these layers is you might want to play around with different weights of both base layers and mid layers depending on the conditions you'll be in the activity that you're doing. If I'm doing a really strenuous activity such as doing a winter summit, then I'm going for a thinner base layer because I'm going to be working up more body heat, and I need my body to be consistently thermoregulating and adjusting to the temperatures and the conditions that I'm hiking in. The other important thing to keep in mind is just because you are bringing all these layers along with you does not mean that you're necessarily going to be wearing them. So a winter summit's a great example. Unless conditions are really rough where it's super snowy and super windy, I'm probably not going to be wearing all of my layers because I'm going to be working up so much body heat. I like to tell my hiking and backpacking clients to be bold, start cold. It is very, very common for hikers to start with too many layers, and then 15 to 20 minutes into their hike, they're already sweating and they're already having to remove layers. This is okay to some extent, but depending on the conditions, it actually could be a little dangerous. The reason being, once you start sweating, if you take a layer off and expose that wetness to the cold, it's going to cool down your body temperature really fast. It's a lot easier for your body to try to maintain a temperature than constantly being cooling down and warming back up. So knowing that your body's gonna start warming up as soon as you start your trek, it's typically best to start with one layer less than you would be comfortable in. Of course, make yourself comfortable, and if you feel best by starting a bit warmer and then stopping to take that layer off, by all means do so. Just make sure you're listening to your body and checking in to make sure you're not overheating. This goes into my next tip, which is remove layers when you get warm. In addition to having the proper layers with you, it's also extremely important to know which ones to wear when and when to take them off. As I mentioned, your main goal when it comes to hiking in the winter is to avoid sweating too much. I mentioned as you start sweating and you take a layer off, you can get cold really fast. This can actually contribute to hypothermia and is one of the most common reasons for a rescue for winter hikers. To avoid sweating, simply remove layers as you get warm and try to keep a consistent pace while you're hiking so your body's not working too hard. And then of course, if you stop to rest or have a snack, then be sure to add that layer when you stop moving. Another thing I like to do, for example, if I'm hiking to an alpine lake or to a summit, is as I can tell that I'm getting closer to my destination, I'll go ahead and stop, put that extra layer on, and then I'm prepared for the elements as I get closer to my destination, and they'll typically get more aggressive. If you are starting to notice a trend here, you're exactly right. Thermoregulation is truly the name of the game as it relates to winter hiking. And taking the time to keep your body properly warm will go a really long way when you're in these types of conditions and keep you safe. If it is super windy, you should 100% be wearing that outer shell that I mentioned earlier. Protecting yourself from the wind is one of the most important things you can do on a winter hike. You can do this with clothing like your shell, seeking a nearby shelter if there's a cabin nearby or a large boulder or rock. You really want to try to cover and protect as much of your skin as possible, especially in extreme winds, and avoid any unnecessary exposure which could lead to things like frostbite. I like to wear sunglasses or snow goggles in extreme windy conditions to protect my eyes, a balaclava or buff to protect my face. Of course, don't forget gloves. And another great tip is to tuck in any layers you can to avoid wind from blowing up your jacket. So I like to tuck my base layer into my pants, and this is also really nice if you're hiking in the snow. So if you were to fall, you're not going to get any snow going up or down your jacket. The whole goal here is to keep your core warm. Some other items that you might want to consider bringing along is extra insulation. So think a beanie, another buff, a second pair of gloves in case yours get wet. And then I also want you to be thinking deep into safety. So in terms of if an emergency came up and you're out in those conditions, something like an extra down jacket or an extra layer might do a really great job of keeping you warm if you're going to be out for longer than you expect. Helping your extremities as much as you can, especially if you're going to be in more extreme conditions, will go a very long way. So doing things like bringing hand warmers, toe warmers, you can even put thermal insoles into your boots for an extra layer of insulation. And then another item that I recommend for safety is actually bringing another set of layers. This is going to be especially nice if you plan on staying out overnight, so doing a winter backpacking trip. Having a clean, dry set of clothing to sleep in will help you keep warm and comfortable overnight. I actually prefer to bring a slightly thicker base layer to sleep in when I'm doing winter camping trips, simply because I know my body's not going to be moving overnight. But this is actually a really important item to bring along for safety reasons too. We already discussed how and why to avoid getting wet and sweaty when you are winter hiking, but it's also important to plan for what happens if you do, and sometimes you simply can't avoid it. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing a solo hike to an alpine lake in Rocky Mountain National Park, and it was a super low visibility whiteout day. There wasn't really anyone out on the trail. I think I saw 3 people in total the entire day. And 2 of those hikers were from California visiting for the first time. They were walking across this alpine lake, and all of a sudden I saw one of them fall right into the lake through the ice, and all of their clothing got completely soaked. Unfortunately, we were over 5 miles away from the trailhead, so we had to rush him back to his car, and it probably would have been better if he had an extra set of clothing to stop and seek shelter and change into, as opposed to hiking that whole 5 miles out frozen and soaking wet. All this to say that having an extra set of clothing, ideally in a dry bag to make sure that it stays dry, could save your life in the right instance. Make sure you bring an extra pair of socks too in case your socks get wet, but bringing extra clothing is one of the 10 essentials and is something that should always be in your pack to some extent. And by that I mean the adventure that you're going on. On the topic of socks, I do want to quickly talk about footwear too. If you are hiking in the winter, especially if it's snowy, you want to make sure that you're choosing waterproof and insulated boots. And then, of course, if you are hiking somewhere where it's snowy, making sure that they're a little bit taller, ideally past your ankles to keep out any snow, will go a long way. And then if you are planning on hiking in snow, I highly recommend bringing along some gaiters. This basically is going to go over your boot and over your pant on the outermost layer of your leg to keep everything below it dry. Gaiters can also be really helpful in the spring as everything's melting and help you avoid getting covered in mud. When you're not wearing these layers and it comes to packing them, I would would try to make sure that the layers that you're going to be needing are easily accessible in your pack. So I like to keep my shell in the top layer of my backpack, also called the brain. If I'm not hiking with my mid layer, I will also put that towards the top of my pack so I can grab it out if I decide to stop or if weather starts coming in. I mentioned before the importance of keeping your core warm, and of course layers are a great and easy way to do that. Another way to keep your core warm is to make sure that you're eating food and drinking while you're out there. This one's really important because our bodies burn a lot of energy just from existing in the cold. And the reason for that is because it's working harder to keep you warm. Doing things like loading up on carbohydrates before you start your hike, so having a really good breakfast will help keep your body warm and fueled for your hike. And then I also love bringing along an insulated jar or a thermos with some soup or a warm meal so I can refuel my body and keep my core warm as I'm resting. Another thing that's important to note is the temperature of the food or drinks that you're putting in your body does matter to some extent. If you're drinking ice cold water, your body's gonna have to work pretty hard to warm that up. So I like to fill up my water bottle with warmer water as it's going to cool down during my day. And I'm a huge fan of bringing along some warm tea. I love bringing peppermint tea with me to sip on along my hike. This is especially helpful if you have any gut issues, if you have asthma, just really taking proper care of your body when you're in more extreme conditions. And speaking of water, if you're gonna be in really cold temps, be careful of the type of water bottle or water reservoir you bring with you. If you bring just a normal water bladder or water reservoir that's not insulated, it's very likely that your water can freeze up in the hose of that, and then it'll make drinking water really, really hard. Same thing goes for a more narrow-mouthed water bottle. I'm a big fan of bringing along a wide-mouthed Nalgene, putting it upside down so the water is all at the bottom of it, and there's no air there that's going to make it ice up. The other option, which is a bit more bulky and more weight, is to bring an insulated water bottle like this to where it's going to stay the same temperature or at least take longer to get really icy. And then in terms of hydration, it's going to be a lot better for you to take smaller sips as opposed to chugging a ton of water all at once. And then if you're going out in really cold temps, you want to prevent your snacks from freezing or getting too cold. So if you're bringing something like a granola bar, I'd recommend chopping that into small pieces and then just putting it in a bag and trying to keep any snacks or food close to your body if it's in something like a wrapper so it's less likely to freeze. This actually goes for batteries too. If you are bringing along any batteries, keep it close to your body so it doesn't literally freeze and exhaust your battery while you're on your hike. My last tip for staying warm on a winter hike is to go have fun. I know this might sound a little silly, but if you are just thinking about how cold you are the whole time, you're not going to enjoy yourself as much. So having a good time is actually going to keep your spirits high and keep your body warmer throughout your day. And with that, I will also say that it's a lot easier to have a good time when you're properly prepared and comfortable on your trip. If you're looking for the best gear to take out on a winter hike or proper layers, I've got all that listed below, but feel free to let me know if you have any questions at all. Before I let you go, I'd love to ask for you to go like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future outdoor adventure tips. Thank you for watching today. I appreciate you, and until next time, happy trails. Oh, thank you for the hug. I love you so much. You say hi to the people? You say hi to the people?